Let's talk about shadow work. I first heard and read about shadow work whilst reading and discovering Carl Jung. So, what is shadow work? Let's begin. To put it simply, your shadow self is the part of you that was never really allowed to exist. It's a part of our personality that we tend to deny or repress, for most of us. Doing shadow work is ultimately the coming back to the self, the coming back to your real authentic self. So in today's video, we're going to talk about what is the shadow work, how to recognize it, why it was repressed, and why ignoring it can block your healing. People who tend to have people-pleasing traits generally are people who have deeply repressed the parts of themselves that can risk being disliked. There are many reasons why someone might choose to repress this side of themselves. For example, if as a child or growing up, anger or any kind of emotion was repressed, and essentially what shadow work is coming to terms with the fact that yes, we do have a good and bad side, but both deserve equally to be loved and both deserve equal compassion. Because we are dual being, we can't repress one side and live only with the other. Either way of doing this, meaning if a person is leaning too much towards the good or if a person is leaning too much towards the bad, both will result in ultimately detrimental behavior. When people hear the word shadow work or shadow self, I think they might feel like they might imagine something dramatic or dark. But psychologically, the shadow is very simple. It's any trait, emotion, need, or impulse that didn't feel or doesn't feel acceptable to you. It's basically the part of you that didn't get space to exist. And the reasons why this side of you would have gotten repressed, essentially, could be for many reasons. For example, maybe as a child you were praised for being the good kid, or maybe as a child you were told off or neglected for showing too many emotions, for being angry or sad or crying a lot. So your nervous system would have adapted to its environment by repressing the sides of you, of yourself, which don't feel acceptable to the carers or to the direct environment around you. So it's essentially you repress the sides of yourself which felt like they would not benefit your survival. Children don't tend to focus on being authentic. The main concern of a developing brain is staying connected, because that is the most important part of surviving. Connection equals survival. That means that we naturally shape ourselves around the behaviors that keep us loved and connected. And over time, two things happen. One, we amplify the traits that tend to get approval. So if being quiet, helpful, responsible or self-sufficient keeps the peace, then those traits become part of our identity. And two, or second, we minimize the traits that cause discomfort and disconnection. So if expressing sadness, anger, confidence, or any needs leads to rejection or even punishment, we then instinctively tuck them away. And this is how the shadow self forms. And we call it shadow because it's hidden. It's in the subconscious. We don't have access to it. We spend a lot of time and effort trying to keep it there. But here's the thing. Every child, every human is born with the full range of emotion that begins from anger all the way to joy. Okay, so now that we talked about what the shadow self is and how it forms, let's talk about how it shows up in everyday life. And I think there are two ways this can happen. It can be a conscious or an unconscious thing. It could be in a way that we are aware of our shadow self, but we don't want to accept it. Or it can be in a way that is very unconscious, but we don't seem to understand why we behave the way we do. So let's start with the first one. The one where we are conscious of it, but we don't want to accept it. Every single one of us already knows that we have emotions and part of ourselves that maybe we don't like so much, or maybe we don't want to bring too much light to. For example, we all have moments where we feel irritated, but we try to hide it. We have moments where we feel jealousy and we feel ashamed of it. We feel angry and we try to swallow it and not show it. We feel sadness, but we try to push it down and numb it. We might feel needy, but we're afraid to be judged. We might want to feel and be confident, but somehow there is shame around that. And we tend to repress these emotions because we tend to say, no, that's bad. We shouldn't feel that way. That is an emotion that is dramatic, dangerous, not acceptable. We repress them because we think we shouldn't have them. That's everyone else probably doesn't have to deal with this, and there's something wrong with us, and so we need to at least pretend that it's not happening. So what we end up doing is judging ourselves and our own emotions instead of listening, accepting, and incorporating them in a way that's beneficial for us. So you might say to yourself things like, I shouldn't be so sensitive, I shouldn't feel jealous, I shouldn't be angry, I shouldn't. This is the part where we are aware of our shadow self, but we reject it. So you feel the emotion, you notice it, but you do not accept it. That rejection creates a gap. It creates a gap between who you really are authentically and who you feel you're allowed to be. And when you do this over many, many, many years, eventually the emotions stop showing up consciously and it starts to create behavior that we're not aware of. And this is what I will get into next. Let's talk about why it's important to address the shadow side rather than judge it, and why it's important to have compassion for it, and more importantly, to listen to it and incorporate it in our daily life. When you stop judging these emotions and when you start meeting them with curiosity and listening to them, something really powerful can start to happen. Your shadow self then stops becoming the enemy and instead starts becoming a source of information. Not only that, but also a way to find your real true self and your authentic self. I know we hear that word a lot, but it's not a jargon, spiritual woohoo word. Standing in your full authentic self is ultimately the most healing aspect of this whole journey. And working with our shadow selves helps us find that person. It helps us find who we really are with unapologetically. So how does that happen? Let's start with anger. So instead of saying, I should never feel so angry, this is wrong, I should be a calm person, yada, 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 all the things that we tell ourselves when this part of ourself shows up that we don't want to give light to. But really, what does anger tell us? Anger shows us our boundaries. When the shadow self shows up and says, I'm angry, I don't like this, well, it's telling you something. It's telling us that someone has crossed our boundary. Something unfair is happening. Something I don't agree to is happening. So we can then welcome our shadow self and say, you're right. How can I put boundaries in place? When we stop suppressing it and when we stop treating it as a bad part that needs to go away, and when it stops being the enemy, it can then become a source of information. Essentially, what it means is that the emotions that we are afraid of or trying to fix can actually be used as signals to understand ourselves better. Anger, integrated and listened to, becomes self-respect. It becomes boundaries. So how does working with anger look like? Anger shows up. We hear it, we accept it, we don't judge it. Instead, we say, why are you here? What is it about the situation that has made you show up? Through this, then, we learn a little bit more about ourselves. Let's talk about jealousy next. I think jealousy is probably one of the most shamed emotion because it's very much associated with being, with having low self-esteem, being insecure, and even immature. And what jealousy says is, there is something here that I really want, but I don't feel quite worthy. I don't feel deserving, and I don't feel quite adequate to claim it. So jealousy in itself is not bad, it's not a problem, it's more so what we attach to it. In practice, what that means is when jealousy shows up, we listen to it rather than judge it and try to push it away. It can tell us a lot about what we are longing for. It can tell us a little bit about where we feel unseen or where our needs are not met, and it can tell us a little bit about what desires we push down from fear or past wound. But most importantly, it tells us about what it is that we really want. Jealousy, in a way, can become direction. This is similar to envy, although envy is more so about losing something, right? Envy is more so about wanting something that someone else has. And so to me, that means that envy tells us about the things that we deeply desire, our dreams, our wishes, our goals. It tells us also about maybe the things that we have not faced in terms of how we have not gone towards our goals and how we have not worked towards the things that we want and need, and etc. And finally, let's talk about sadness. A lot of people will try to numb sadness, bury sadness, not let it show up and not feel it because it's an overwhelming emotion. But sadness is equally important because it tells us about our unmet needs, about where we feel loss and longing and maybe exhaustion. So again, sadness is another way that our subconscious can tell us about the things that we desire, the places where perhaps we have ignored ourselves and ignored our own needs. So essentially, when we stop attacking these parts of ourselves, when we start integrating this part of ourselves, we can start to get a fuller, clearer picture of who we really are. But this is not about becoming a better person, right? This is not about how to be more good, because that would then repress everything we just talked about, right? So it's just about a balance of both. We've somehow, as a society, learned to accept that everything that is equal joy, love, etc. is acceptable, but everything else is not, when actually we need the whole picture to function as a fully efficient, well-developed human being. Because let me tell you, one thing that will not happen is you cannot bury these part of yourself. No one can bury this part of themselves and never feel them or never have them control some aspect of our lives. It's better to be aware of them and control them rather than try and numb them and then have them control every other aspect and emotion and reaction. Reactions happen much faster than our mind can process. We react and then we think. Our nervous system reacts, and we're talking about split seconds here, but nevertheless, it is the reality. Essentially, what I'm trying to say is that you can either be conscious, aware, and in control of your shadow self, or you can be unconscious, unaware, or trying to numb your shadow self, and in which case it will control your reactions and emotions without your awareness. In the words of Carl Jung himself, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life. So when we bring compassion to these pieces of ourselves, we stop living our life from the background, and instead we start living from awareness and choice and authenticity. That was an introduction to shadow work and shadow self. I hope you enjoyed it. Stay tuned for more on this topic and let me know in the comment section if you have any questions, or tell me in the comments a trait about yourself that you've always judged that might actually be trying to protect you. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.